Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're just gonna let folks come in for the next couple minutes, and then we'll get started. So welcome. Hopefully you're in the right spot. If you're not, we won't take it personally if you have to bail, but I'm Melina, and I'm the co-founder and CEO at HelpSeeker Tech, and we're gonna be chatting about data models today and how they can be leveraged in municipalities, provincial governments, or NGOs, but anybody that's dealing with complex societal level issues and are collecting data and are passionate about data and want to do data better. So it's going to be a little bit technical, but I'll try to throw in some examples as well to keep everybody excited and engaged, and we'll definitely make sure we have some space for questions as well. And welcome everyone. I'll just do a couple of shout outs in here because as we always do before we start. If anybody's wondering, there will be a recording of this, of course, and there will be a bit of a follow-up so that you have some of these tools in your inbox as well. So don't worry about that. And then in the meantime, though, if folks want to say hello, just test out the chat, say hello, and then we can see where everybody's coming from. But yep, you're coming to the Designing for Impact, How Strong Data Models Drive Better Outcomes webinar. And it's the whole concept of lining everybody up behind a structure in your data framework that can support your goals at the frontline and system level as well. So let's take a look at folks in the room. Do you guys want to say hello in the chat? And if you want to throw in your name, what community you're joining us from, and the treaty number or the traditional name of your territory, it's always what we do, and it just keeps everybody more engaged with our commitment to reconciliation in a more informal way as well, and kind of keeps that top of mind for us as a Canadian company, and all of you probably as Canadians too. So I'll say hello to Cam. Hi, Cam. Regina, Saskatchewan, Treaty 4, homeland of the Métis Nation. Right on, right on. And welcome. And yeah, if anybody wants to put their chat, I'm going to do the same, and then I'll do a couple more shout outs for another minute, and then we'll get going.
Sarah.
Oops. And apparently Sarah's calling me, which she doesn't know I'm in a webinar. So Alina here, and Treaty 7. Okay, Jim from the Terrace of the Tsuki Nation, Vancouver Island, beautiful. Noura, hello Noura, from Niganan Housing Ventures, Treaty 6. I know where you are, Edmonton. Fantastic. Angela Rodriguez La Rosa. Angela, data and resource analyst at Salal in Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Hopefully I said that correctly. Amazing. Keep saying hello. You guys are meeting each other as much as you're meeting me, because there's not that many people that are into data models, and so when you find your people, you want to get to know them. But with that being said, I'm gonna move us through the content, and then we'll have time for some of your questions. And please feel free to drop those in, because we do review them and answer them in the course of the webinar. So the context for why we're doing this particular webinar, it's really that data dilemma. And this is somebody's office, but if that looks familiar, and hopefully it does not, but it does happen. A lot of the times, some of these contexts where data collection is happening can feel like a checkbox exercise, so a burden and not necessarily a strategic asset in your organization. I do want to also make the point that there is a disconnected systems aspect to it, where you have, sometimes they're folders, sometimes they're Excels, sometimes you've got multiple data systems as well within your organization, and that disconnection is happening quite consistently across, whether you're a municipal government or a department or provincial territorial governments or NGOs that are delivering the service on the ground. You're not unique. This is the standard from what we've seen in our partners. And again, the concept being that we're doing this for compliance, and I'd say for funders, but sometimes it's for the decision makers versus for impact. And other times, what I've also seen more recently, and it almost seems like the more complex your organization is, the more paralysis there is on using the data for impact as well. And I don't quite fully understand why when you're staring at the data and it's very clear what it's telling you, and there's just this paralysis around taking a stance on what it means. And again, I think some of these issues stem from the lack of a clear data framework because you're not confident in that data and you're not willing in some cases put your job on the line for your opinion. So how do we tackle that earlier on? So I wanted to start too about like breaking this down. What the heck is a data model? And I picked a picture of a really beautiful structure because it really is the architecture of your entire edifice, right? Entire system of care sometimes, but more specifically around your data collection and data strategy. So without a data model, and if you don't know what it is, that's okay. You're going to walk away today knowing what it is and seeing an example of it and I picked a project that we're doing that I think will be super interesting for you guys because the social safety net is not just social services, as you know. It's the education system, corrections, but it's also the healthcare system. And HelpSeeker has been doing quite a bit of work recently with provincial healthcare systems and understanding, what's bottlenecking some of our healthcare experience in Canada. And I'm going to show you some examples from that without obviously talking about which government we're working with. But this stuff is pervasive, and I just want to normalize it. The lack of a clear data model is pervasive in some of our most sophisticated systems of care. So if you're from a homeless serving agency or a food bank or a small municipality or county government and you're feeling like, oh, this is because we're small, it's everywhere. So don't feel bad. But breaking it down, what the heck is a data model? It's literally the structure of how your information is organized and connected. Like I said, I'm going to show you an example of just so you wrap your head around what an artifact might be, how you might present something like this, how you might collect this. But it serves as that blueprint for your organizational story, and it's absolutely foundational that you get it right, and you can't overemphasize how important it is to get it right, because everything else, and you not just get it right the first time, but stick to it, and that data model becomes almost like it's like your sacred thing. Like you do not mess with the data model, and my team always knows that when we're implementing in a new organization. And can we move this field around over here? No, why not? It's not in the data. No, that's not what the data model is. You have to be absolutely a bit of a hard line on the data model. Otherwise, it's not a data model anymore. Otherwise, we're going back to the other situation, which we do not want. And then the last piece, though, is that it also shows not just the structure of what you're doing in the organization and your work, but it's also the relationships of how data links together as well. So that's the big stuff to remember. It's the relationships that you later need to visualize or answer questions about. So again, relationships, I'm not talking about like so-and-so is married to so-and-so. It's actually like how are cases connected to clients, for instance. That would be a data relationship. So how does stuff like this start? How do we begin to understand what our data model might be? And I mentioned that I was going to show you guys something from a different system just for fun, because I feel like we often only talk about the social care sector, which is a really important part of the social safety net. But everything that we do, has various, sometimes looking in the mirror in another part of the social safety net. So I picked healthcare here is a interesting reflection. So I encourage you to do that because If you're just hearing the same examples over and over again about like, oh, the homeless organization, the food bank, the outreach program, the mental health counseling program, then it kind of, you're stuck on that, and you're not thinking, you're not bringing yourself up higher at the strategic level. So what I'm showing you here is a real problem in, well, in this particular jurisdiction we're working with, but it's around surgeries and surgery wait times. Being this jurisdiction has really relatively poorer outcomes than other jurisdictions. And one of the reasons that for this, and this is just one reason, but one of the reasons is that their referral pathways for facilities that were serving different parts of the province were not fully optimized. So that's one challenge. The other one, that patients don't necessarily know where to go for their support, and they don't necessarily have a consistent way of matching patients to the right facility. So I'm like, hey, sound familiar? Anybody in the coordinated access world on homelessness? So that problem is everywhere, right? Mental health pathways, same thing. There's so many providers, but we don't have enough providers, but sometimes providers are waiting for patients in different contexts. So the system's not optimized. And so their data challenge, one of them is, how do we capture the right information to know ultimately how to stream and optimize those referrals, and make sure that where we have capacity, we're not sending, you're not waiting for your local surgeon when you could just be driving 50 minutes this way to another jurisdiction, another part of the province, but it's actually faster. You can get the surgery done in 6 months versus a year and a half. And overall, the emergency pathways are shortened, the costs are shortened, and longer term, the patient is happier because they're not in pain from needing a knee replacement for 2 years because they're not the top priority for their local, site. So it's the same story in other jurisdictions and other sectors as well within the social safety net. And I think this is a really interesting pathway. So the step one, and again, this is illustrative, you can take this concept and apply it to anything, but the first thing is we need to break down the components of that journey, and think about how is it happening currently, and what gets collected at all of these stages, right? Because there's a patient that's referred, so there's certain information that has to come in. There's an initial assessment. What does the patient need? Or again, substitute this for any other component. Is this a coordinated access model? Then you still need to figure out your initial assessment for mental health or for housing, etc. Are you eligible? And that's a decision point. That's why it's a little stop sign there. Are you eligible? If not, you need to notify the referring provider. So something needs to kind of close that loop. They call it closed loop referrals in some cases, closing the loop. But like, notice this is like just in the first box, right? So you need to have some kind of notification that goes back. But let's say you are eligible for this service, in this case surgery, but you're eligible for housing, you're eligible for mental health support, you're eligible for child welfare support or family reconciliation support, etc. There's tests and evaluations. There's further things that the program needs to do to make sure that that you're actually, properly matched to the right service within, even once you are in the system, if you will. You need to get consent. You need to get insurance and final clearance, right? So and think about that. There's this coordination that needs to happen before you even begin to get that service. And then of course you got to get going on getting your first, your actual delivery of the thing you came in for, the service. You got to get it scheduled, right? The client has to come in to get this access. And of course you need to check, do I have the space, right? And in this case, it's, do I have the operating room availability? Do I have housing to house this client? Do I have emergency space to support this client? Do I have space in my caseload to support this client? And then you need to get that stuff scheduled, make sure you've got all your resources in place, Again, here we're talking about equipment, you know, the scalpels, the implant itself, right? You got to make sure those resources are there. If you're a food bank, do I have the right food to the hamper food to provide the hamper to this client? Are all those resources available? Check, 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 and then we actually can move forward, right? So there's prep work before that client even gets that service. The prep, the instructions to patient, here's what to expect, client, right? Oftentimes programs will have a program checklist, or they'll have a what to expect while you're in our program. Here's some rules. Here's what to expect as you move through our case process, our case life cycle, right? And then finally, the client is admitted, right? They sign off on all those rules, and they're bought in. Everybody knows, everybody's on the same page. The deliveries performed, and I picked surgery because it's kind of a beginning and end. But I'm not delusional that a lot of you are in ongoing services with clients, and that the surgery is actually like a series of case uh, delivery instances, right, that are happening. But let's say this little box, the surgery performed, where you're delivering your case management, you're delivering your housing intervention, you're delivering your childcare intervention. It's done. You're performing it. There's post-operative care. There's ensuring that the client knows what to do once that service is completed. So that graduation concept, or your instructions. Here's how to make sure you don't fall back into homelessness. Some resources, some follow-up, some discharge planning, right? What happens after we're finished here? In this instance, discharge planning is relatively simple. Most surgeries in joint surgeries, about 94% to 98%, depending on the year, actually have very, very short length of stay, 1 to 2 days, ideally less than 24 hours when they're not complex. Most people move on pretty quickly, and discharge planning is as simple as who's picking you up and here's your instructions, right? But there are discharge plans that need to be developed that are more comprehensive for complex, depending on the complexity of the client. And if something happened during the surgery itself, and you can imagine that happening during your mental health intervention as well, if something occurred or you unearth additional complexity as you deliver your service, then discharge planning can be much more, might need to be much more comprehensive, and it might need to create the handover to another organization as well for longer term care if that's not part of your model. And then, of course, best practice is we do our follow-ups, and we check in with the client, again, depending if it's a one-time, really low complexity client with low risk, in this case, infection or revision, these are clients that don't have high obesity or trimorbidity or anything like that. They're primarily healthy clients that are getting a simple intervention. But there are those 9% that are more complex, and within the 9%, there's about 10% of those are really, really, really complex, and they need longer term follow-up. They might need longer term care as well. So that follow-up with the patient is much more comprehensive. So point being on this, and you're like, why am I talking about a data model and talking about a flow diagram? Because you need to understand what you're building towards, right? That's the context. So once you have this mapped out, right, what does the actual data model look like? And again, how do you accommodate that entire flow in your data model? Well, you need to map out your data model to make sure it collects all that data, and all that data that comes in, doesn't matter what step I was talking about, intake, follow-up, middle of the intervention. What you're looking at here is a data model that will allow us to tell stories about that experience and optimize that system, make sure that we're collecting all the right metrics, no matter what stage it's in. And I find people make the mistake of creating a data model for each step, like intake, and then you try to do everything at once, or intervention, and you do another form, right? And exit, and you do another form. And that's fine, but they all have to feed the same data model underneath, or you're never going to be able to know even something as simple as how many surgeries for how many clients did I do? Because if you're collecting the data at all the steps and it doesn't have a structure, and this is what a very simple structure of that patient flow I showed you before looks like, right? We've got surgery staff, right? And this is just how a data model looks like when you put it all together. And these boxes are actually coordinated to these boxes too. That's why they're different colors, just to give you an idea later on when you're looking at this. String, text, right? These tell you, and the ID, this tells you how things are connected, right? So the ID, the staff ID, staff name, right, full name, what role the staff has, are they the surgeon? What's their availability? What's their contact info? We need to make sure that there's a case manager when we need them. We need a surgeon to do the surgery, right? So there's a staff, but not all staff are surgery staff. But because we have an ID that links the ID from staff to surgery staff, we can tell that there's a connection here and that it's that person's in play. Same on patients. If the patient we don't have an ID on the patient, then you're never going to be able to know how many clients or patients that I have, or clients or participants. Everybody has a bit of a different name for these. And then there's the surgeries themselves, right? So the surgeries have to have their own identifier so that you can see like at which surgeries had the most complex clients, and what kind of which staff did we have on those cases? Are there staff when this certain constellation of staff occur during certain times of the year with certain types of patients, we tend to have better outcomes. Interesting, right? So because you're kind of connecting these dots, you're able to answer those really interesting questions. Same thing around operating rooms. Operating rooms are a key resource. You can't do the delivery. You can't do the housing without the housing. You need to capture information about the housing units themselves, or the office space, right? The recovery room. These are all components of that data model that we need to track, right? So just to give you an idea of what a data model looks like, it's a standardized way of ensuring that we've got the right components in the data framework that are going to be able to follow along with your ideal journey pathway and answer these important questions. So that's just one tiny example. And I'm sure other people have great examples as well. I don't purport to have surgeries figured out. We're just in the middle of it, but super interesting, and super interesting that those things are not in place in these big systems right now. They have data models, but they don't actually necessarily roll up, right? And so when we think about why data models work, the ones that work, because just having the data model is not going to do anything unless you actually build it in a proper way, right? So I showed you a surgery one, might actually not work in practice, because what you actually have to think about is, why they matter and when they matter. So they matter when we're trying to do that coordinated person-centered care, right? Because it has to have a goal. What are we trying to achieve? It has to have that demonstrating impact and reporting on outcomes component. And then, of course, it needs to get you that better decision. So timely information for strategy, right? So if these three components don't come together, then your data model is probably not the right one. So just having it is great, but judge it against whether is it serving you well, right? Is it serving you well? Is it doing this? And if it's not, just because you have it, right? And this big system, this healthcare system we're working with, they have a data model, but it's not the right one, right? Because it doesn't answer these important questions. And so it's not leading to coordinated person-centered care. It's not demonstrating impact, and it's not informing better decisions, right? So if it's not serving us well, then there's something fundamentally off in our data model. So how do you design it for everyone? And I picked this picture of a very, very simple component dashboard here that everybody's experienced, going to check what time your flight's at, right? So that behind that thing is a data model with all the complex scheduling of airplanes, like airplanes coming in and out. You can imagine how complex that that is. And the person, the traveler here, doesn't see everything in the data model. All they need to know is like, right, my time, my flight, right, my destination, my gate. So don't get tricked into thinking that serving the stakeholder or the user has to be the only component that you worry about. And that's another design mistake in data models that I've come across. So one, we build it for this hypothetical academic component that doesn't answer those impact questions. Or on the other side, we say, that was dumb. This doesn't help my day-to-day frontline staff. And then we defer to right or wrong, it's well-meaning, but we defer to frontline staff that have no idea about data models or the bigger picture around systems design or systems analysis. And again, not their problem. It's our problem as the data people. We have to do some education on, hey, this is the stuff you care about. Terminal 1 check-in is what you care about. That's awesome. But no, it's gonna need to look like this a little bit. I'm gonna challenge you on what your concept of a client is, and I'm gonna challenge you on the concept of what a case is. And the fact that those two are different things, or the distinction between a family and a case and a client. You will not believe how many conversations I've had like that, where the frontline staff will say, no, the client is the case. And you remember the data model. No, those are two different boxes, yo. They could be connected. The client can be part of a case, but you can have multiple clients that are part of a case. And what if you have a person that is a client and a staff, right? And they're working in the same organization and they have these complex relationships. If you only worry about what the frontline considers that they need to see, then you're going to miss the bigger picture. So it's your responsibility to do the data model right, and in implementation, educate along that path. And you'll actually be their hero ultimately, because you're going to get them data that they can actually use in the long run but I'm not going to say that there isn't like a change component to this, change management component to this. So frontline needs absolutely, you can make it easy and relevant to do your daily work, but you remember, you got to satisfy an entire organization, not just one program or one staff. And you need to be able to roll that up at the leadership level to have metrics, trends, compliance, and have those balancing properly between core fields and program flexibility. And there absolutely is a way to do that. If you do your data model correctly and you use UX or the user experience to build pages that only show the things that that particular program needs to see, or that particular staff within that program need to see. And the more uncomplicated and kind of stripped back you make it, the better the results you're going to have, because they don't need to understand the complexity in the background. They just need to see what they need to collect that day and what they need to see on the metrics side. And you should always customize it for the end user like that. But aligning across programs and having that common language, core framework, and program flexibility, that does not mean that you do not have standardization in your data model on the back end. So this is about harmonizing, not homogenizing. You're not forcing everybody in the same thing, right? You're allowing, and we'll show you some examples in a second here, but you can have common language, like a case is a case is a case, a person is a person is a person, right? We're not mixing apples and oranges in the same bucket. You keeping those entities distinct, you connect them through your data model, you know how they link, reference links, or however you're connecting it in your software. But that core framework is sacred, if you will. You create a data dictionary and you change it never, as much as that your standard should be there for a really long time, or you should be really, really cheap about making edits to it. Fields, though, don't care, right? We started, and here's how it kind of goes. When you do your client journey mapping at the program level, we just did a big implementation. There's still programs coming out of left field right now, but I think we're at 20 programs, I believe. And there's 20 programs in this one organization, and every single one of them has a slightly different flow of clients, because they serve very diverse things. Employment, one does employment. Oh, that's my half an hour. So the organization does employment, they do mental health, they do childcare, they do smoking cessation, cancer wellness. They do so many programs. Every single program is distinct. So not surprisingly, their data collection, when we put it all together, I think they had about 3,000 data elements in it. Now, my team will say to me, but Alina, we should be making them strip back. Okay, I agree. You're asking about gender in a slightly different way. Can we not agree to just ask about it this way? But the reality is, if you go into your frontline teams and you say, hey, you got to ask about gender this way, not that way, that you're probably going to get some pushback. If I know, some might not care, but others will. So you've got to manage those expectations and move people along the change process slowly and show that you're listening. So, bringing in all the data up front and analyzing it and showing that alignment over time, you can't skip that and you can't top down it, right? Because you need to bring people along and they need to understand. They need to come to those conclusions themselves in some ways. You need to lead the horse to water, but you need to also respect that horse knows what they're doing as well. There's probably a really good reason about asking it in a particular way. So what we do is actually start big. You start with all the data elements. And then as you implement, because your data framework sits on top of those 3,000 elements, and the data model is pretty clear, you can actually kind of parse those 3,000 elements, and you can say, okay, 1,000 of those are to do with clients. So they kind of go on that side. And about 200 have to do with spaces, right? Or resources, and they can go over here. Another 1,000 have to do with like just events, things happening, critical incidents, whatever. Presentations, doesn't matter, whatever you're collecting your interactions about. So you can start to parse it out, and then within them, you can start thematizing like, okay, demographics are a thing. Okay, so you can kind of bucket within your data model the kind of questions that this is about, and then you can start to bring forward some proposals about things that, hey, can we live without this data element? Yes or no? Like you should be doing that anyways. From a privacy perspective, this is a good opportunity to do a bit of a check-in, like 3,000 data elements. Like, can you imagine how much data that is when you look at it? It's a lot of data. Like, chances are we're over collecting here, right? So there's an opportunity to kind of cull the data that's being collected at that point and really, really narrow it in while keeping the people with you, the programs with you along the way, because they're on that journey with you. So these are not one and done. It's not just ChatGPTing a data framework and then telling everybody they have to do it. This is a change management process. This is a people thing as much as a technical thing. So whoever is taking this on, consider that piece. If you don't get the buy-in into the data framework and you're not doing your education properly and you're not listening, you're not going to be successful, right? Because it can be the proper framework, but everybody hates you and your system and they're not going to adopt it. It can be you making up the framework without listening to the 3,000 elements and making sense of, okay, what are they actually doing here? Understanding the flow of clients, understanding the outcomes, understanding what the funder requirements are. Some things you cannot change. Some things are beyond the powers of the people you're implementing this with, because it's funder required. So how do we ensure that the data framework, without compromising its integrity, can still deliver on those aspects? And again, I think I did a thorough job explaining the take stock and inventorying the data sources, but let me say it again. So taking stock, doing that deep dive inventory, get it all, just get it all. Doesn't matter. Forms, Excels. I love getting Excels because they tell you so much about how programs think about things. And I love getting intake forms and any forms, service delivery forms, anything like that is a really great, that's how you start. Bring all that stuff in and just say, and any and all, and then start sorting through it, right? identify what that ideal system needs to be and what kind of answers it needs to answer for your stakeholders. So for the frontline staff, the requirements are going to be very different. So for them, it might be who's on my case, right? Who's on my caseload? Who am I servicing? Okay, for decision makers, let's say your political decision makers, it might be, are we getting best value for our investment? Okay. So therefore I should be collecting information about how much time, because time equals money. Majority of the social safety net is really operating costs from staffing, 70% for sure. In most organizations, that's where the budget goes, unless you're, have a big capital spend on housing, but that's capital, right? But that means that you need to collect how many staff are doing and what the staff are doing. So during that time, how many service interactions have you had per hour, right? And during that service interaction, what was the outcome of that service interaction? So then we can do the division of, we had 100 service interactions. Out of those, 70% reported of the clients reported their rating of that service encounter was 8 out of 10, and their skill improvement is, 50% reported that their skill in family conflict resolution has improved. So therefore, we can take that and divide it by how many hours, and the hourly cost for a staff is this. Therefore, our return is X. That type of requirement is what the data framework is meant to unearth. Choose your approach. Is it an integration? Is it incremental? Is it a platform, right? Are you implementing a brand new software? That's usually much more of a bigger commitment, right? Is it an integration, right? Are we just trying to kind of connect the dots between existing platforms and making that a little bit smoother? Is it an incremental? Let's start with just putting the Excels into one we call it the master sheet. Like when we've done this in Homeward Trust, where they had different, they have different data systems, but they also had lots of Excels. So we're like, let's just try to get the Excels on one page as a step, because that's really instructful too before you jump. So you can choose the approach. It's not an all or nothing. Cleaning data, if you do move forward with aligning to a new data framework, sorry to tell you, but your data is going to be really bad. And I have not seen an instance where the data is good. There's data processing, data cleaning that's required, realignment of the data against the new framework, right? Because the data hasn't been recorded in a proper structure usually. So you need to do that mapping. It's called data mapping, where you say, okay, if gender is female in this data set, that matches to gender female plus in the new data set, or however, that's not an exciting example, but if date of birth was collected, year 4 digits / 2 digits, month, and / 2 digits, day, and we're collecting it the opposite way, where it's day, month, year, that has to be mapped too. It's at that level of granularity that the data mapping has to happen ultimately, if you're moving in this kind of more technical direction. So that standardization has to occur, and usually because you're dealing with multiple data sets, there's not much automation, unfortunately, from what I have seen. Sorry to say again. There's tricks, of course, on common patterns of bad data, but a lot of it, we ended up having to, well, how do you say this properly? We went in one data set. Once we cleaned the data, turns out that they had about an inflation of 70% people. So they had 70% less people than they thought once you figure this all out, right? So because the data, they were collecting it in such different ways that a person wasn't a person, and they were consistently. So that's bad, right? And this is an opportunity to do that, and you would not believe how many of your data sets have those really big problems. And then, of course, training and implementing building skills, managing that change process, like I said, is a huge, huge component of this. And I mean, it's ongoing. Like most of our data implementations, they have monthly maintenance. that we need to do because there's new staffing, there's new needs, there's a new funder, there's a new program. So you never, it's an ongoing thing. It's not a one and done project. All right. So I think I mentioned a little bit about this one program, and I'm putting them together a little bit just for privacy. But the context was around coordinated care, so fragmented records between agencies, and without that common data model and a single platform, that coordinated care wasn't happening, and measurable outcomes cannot happen. Even within one organization, like I said, there was inflation within their between programs themselves. So before you can really integrate well with another organization, I would definitely suggest you need to consider yourself as an organization to have a coordinated care model internally. This is a big insight for most organizations, because they're so focused on the flow of clients between organizations that they forget that they actually have a mini microcosm, sometimes a big microcosm, macrocosm, whatever the word is. Sometimes they actually have that problem internally, right? So you're never going to fix it. You're never going to fix somebody else's backyard until you fix what's in yours, I would say. And when you dig into your own, it gives you a different perspective on what's happening across organizations. Programs operate, and even within the same program, they have different funding streams. It gets even more complex. That was another learning. But those fragmented records are happening within your own organization. And I almost would say what you need to do to achieve coordinated care has to happen within your own shop. I don't know if it's before or at the same time. I haven't figured out like the best scenario for that yet, because there hasn't been enough of these use cases to kind of see what the best optimal kind of sequence is. But damn, you got to do it. Like one of the, doesn't matter which one, just start doing this, right? So instead of separate programs, get your community partners and to think as a system of care. But first, get your own programs to think as a system of care for your own organization. You would not believe how insular and protective programs are within the same organization. When the funder's thinking, oh, I'll give this money to this organization because they have a great kind of coordinated approach to this issue. No, not necessarily. So the programs themselves sometimes are more siloed. I've seen more integration between organizations in some cases than within an organization. So don't buy into that assumption. Okay, another world example, the multi-service nonprofit. Again, this is a big implementation that we did, and I mentioned it a couple of times, but they had Excel workbooks everywhere. They've got some online collection components. They've got old databases. And again, I'm kind of generalizing just to not reveal too much detail, but essentially the organization's instances were that they were exactly experiencing what I mentioned before, that the programs themselves, even employment, they had a completely different arrangement with their funder than the family wellness programs. And as a result, we're on completely different systems. And they had, so when you ask this organization, how many clients did you serve? And the fundraising person, poor person, she's like, I just need a number, right? So if that's the context you're working in, starting with the how many clients do we have is a really good place. It's a really good place. And you'll be surprised how when you look across programs, they had 15, I think I have the key discoveries in here summarized. Yeah, 15% of their clients were across multiple programs. But they were also able to really define how the programs worked with each other as well. Because as you're implementing a new data model, you're having these conversations and you're asking those really pointed questions like, so if the client comes into family program, but the dad is also needing a job, do you guys work together? No, different. No, we're not allowed. What do you mean you're not allowed? Well, we don't have, that's private. Why is that private? Well, because because whatever, right? Privacy. Okay, well, what do you mean about privacy? Like, what are you sharing with the employment program? And they'll say, well, this family program has child welfare information, and the employment program shouldn't know that. Like, okay, well, don't share that part, right? You don't have to share everything in one program's record to the other one. It's called role-based access, and we'll chat about that in a second. But your data model can coexist with a role-based access model too. Role-based access just says who has access to what fields, primarily, in what context, and what records, and your data model is your data model. So you can actually mix and match those things and create a really refined matrix to say, hey, my family program is letting the employment program know that they're sending an internal referral, and that internal referral doesn't even necessarily need to tell them which program name is associated with that file. It just comes in as an internal referral. Why? Because everybody knows this program is child welfare, right? So just the program name itself within the organization reveals details that may be a privacy concern. You can absolutely do that. It does not mess up your data model. That's called role-based access. That's a different component of your software configuration. So you can absolutely maintain that. So yeah, definitely better internal referrals. I will say one more thing about this context and this kind of privacy fear within organizations. It usually comes from not being presented with proper options, and sometimes it's just they know that like their access or their Excel, you can't curate your Excel so that that program can't see certain fields. So they don't know that it's possible with software nowadays that you can be really, really granular. So you got to do some education around that. The other thing that is important here and why data frameworks are critical, because as you get more of these internal referrals and eventually external referrals, having a common understanding of what a person is kind of basic, right? So if you're sending information about an event or an incident, but it's a referral, how are they supposed to understand that it's actually to do with the same client or a common client? So the framework is absolutely essential to making these relationships between entities work within your organization and between organizations. But yeah, ultimately impact reporting. So this program now, thankfully, is able to talk about how many clients they have as a whole, how many those are unique people, how many families they have, how many cases they have per program, right? How many events occur and what type of events occur and what the outcome of those interactions are at the client and case, family, or household level. So that's what the value is. They couldn't before. They just couldn't. They didn't have any way to do it. So that plus theoretically, right? If you do this well, and if you bring people along and you're not a jerk in the process, and you get people excited and you give them that immediate gratification, like, hey, you put this data in, boom, your dashboard's automatically updated. You can see what's happening. It's really, really, really cool to see what people do with that information in their case management approach and how they are thinking about policy change. It's that immediate insight right in real time as they're putting data in, they're seeing things they've never seen before. Like, I didn't know all of our clients were coming from this one place. Interesting. Why? Right? It's super interesting. It's so basic, right? Like as a data analyst, you're like, wow, that's just like basic distribution, but they've never had it before. So you don't know the innovative stuff that frontline management, that executive leadership can see when you feed them the right data that meets their day-to-day needs. And again, don't have the same dashboard for all these folks. You got to curate your insights for that family program. And within the family program, is it the manager, right? Is it the caseworker? Is it the administrative assistant? Every single one of them should have their own user experience tailored to their needs. Why? Because what's the point of doing this otherwise, right? They have to have that feedback right away. So takeaways and kind of wrapping this baby up. Strong models equals strong outcomes. Data structure is absolutely the backbone of your impact. If you don't got one, get one. Hopefully this convinced you. Design is for everybody. That frontline value and leadership insights have to be taken into account. You have to listen. You do not know better. right? You know different, and you bring your value add as a data research specialist, but you do not know better, because these folks live and breathe this stuff. And if they're telling you you don't got it, you got to keep going. You keep going until they're happy, and without compromising, right? The sacredness of the data framework, but the data framework needs to be refined with everybody's input. Aligning essentials, but allow for that flexibility. Like I said, be really, really sticky with this common core, but allow those program specific elements as well, and evolve your infrastructure step by step. Prioritize those low hanging fruit right off the top, build a backlog for the changes in terms of if you are implementing new software or new tools for data collection and reporting, and principles before tools. So strategy first, what are we trying to do here as an organization? Technology second, have that data strategy before you choose a software. Software is garbage, nothing. It's just another Excel sheet if you don't have this figured out. And implementing people usually don't know. So yeah, how to get started? Start small, one program, one data point. Like I said, start with one program, then go to the second and just iterate on it. Involve everyone, including clients sometimes if it's appropriate. We're doing a project right now with people living experience with lived experience and housing homelessness program, and it's like super interesting, right? When you actually ask people that are getting the data collected about what they think, what their experience needs to be. It's a completely, interesting insight there. Address the privacy consent access controls like I talked about. And limited budget, there's grants, right? There's digitization grants are about 12 grand. You can get going. Partnership, open source tools, coming to webinars like this to just get your mind in the game is great. And prototyping is really, really cool for it. So I'm going to open it up to QA and just see what you guys do. But I wanted to share a really fun tool here that I used just to prototype what I'm trying to build. And so yeah, what I wanted to just show you is it's called Lovable. Really cool. I actually found out about this from a deputy minister of technology and innovation, and he loves it. And I was like, oh, I'll share it with you guys. But what's cool about it is you can prototype what's in your head. You're like, okay, here's what I want. I want data quality. I want housing success. I want client profiles. I want to see how things roll up. I want to see how my clients go into my housing programs, go into my organization, how they all connect to my platform. I want to have insight, right? I want to see, I don't know, housing, sheltered and outreach, active clients, whatever. And the cool part about this, it's like you just tell it and it just builds it for you. This is one that I was telling you guys about relationships. If you don't have the right entity, right? Family services, the program. This is a client, right? This is a type of a client. Sorry, risk medium, a type or medium risk client. Cases, right? That's a different concept. Staff, and you can see the relationships, and then you can see like, oh crap, I was about to assign a case manager that's actually the dad of a potential client, right? So your data can answer these network type questions as a result. And yeah, and the whole concept of, how do we configure this thing to meet provincial ministry needs or federal funder needs, community organizations or trauma-informed services. It's absolutely possible to do it by doing this field mapping, right? So absolutely not a problem. And tools like this allow you to visualize it and show your teams what's in your head and checking in with them before investing in tons of infrastructure as well. So I've really liked this for prototyping kind of what's in my head, and then my team can run after me and develop things much quicker as a result. So I'll share that, and let's see what you guys have for questions here. Okay, why is it called a data model, not a pathway or algorithm? Oh, that's a great, well, it's definitely not an algorithm, because where algorithms are kind of equations, if you will, and the pathway is like a process. Data model shows structure and relationship. So that's why it's called a data model specifically. Data pathway, you can, and again, super easy to do. Go on Google and look up data model or data pathway, and you'll see, or data algorithm, you'll see right away that they're very distinct concepts. So that's why it's a data model. Not to say you don't need a data process or flow diagram. You should do that too. And if there's algorithms you can develop, because you can, for instance, match clients more efficiently, because you know what client characteristics and needs match to services, and therefore you can make better suggestions, then that would be the algorithm part. Okay, Srinath is asking, here's the situation. Let's say about 100 people have visited drop-in center for harm reduction. All of them receive supplies, around 5 ask for testing, and only 1 person returns to get the results. How can a data model capture and make sense of this information? Really, really great question. So right there, I can see a couple of data concepts that you would need to collect. So first, I would have the concept of a person, right? Because you talk about people. People have characteristics, right? People have names, they have dates of birth, they have needs, they have service requests, they have locations potentially, etc. So people are, the concept of a person needs to be in your data model. Drop-in, right there, drop-in makes me think 2 things. Is that a program? Or is that an activity? Or is that a service? Or is that a facility? What is the drop-in itself? And Srinath, if you have an answer to any of those, just throw it in the chat, and I'll see what you say. It's a facility. Okay, so now you've got a facility. So far we have person and we have building, facility. Okay, so all we know is that there's people coming into a building. Okay, and then the next thing you said is that they're coming in for harm reduction services. So that makes me think that there's somebody delivering those services, like a program, like staff. Now, question for you again, is that a program, or is that something that stays with the facility all the time? Or is that part of something else? Is that a program that does multiple things, and one of the things they do is they provide harm reduction services within that facility? That's another important question, because that tells me if that program is a distinct entity that delivers what services it delivers, because they probably don't just do, maybe they only do harm reduction, but knowing what a drop-in facility houses, it's usually more than that. They usually do harm reduction services. They probably do facilitate a safe space, right? They probably also do, I don't know, supervision in the bathrooms. Like, I used to work in a drop-in facility, and I swear I would come out semi-high out of the bathroom all the time. So there's an element of just creating a safe, welcoming space. So somebody needs to do that too. Is that the same thing that does harm reduction? Because we should be capturing that as well. But let's just stick to, let's assume that somebody else, there's another program that does the safety and operations of the facility, and let's assume that this harm reduction service is, let's say, provided by a program that strictly does public health, so harm reduction services. So all of them receive supplies. So now I know, you said something interesting here. You said the word service. So there's a program that provides a service. Program is distinct from service. You can have programs that provide multiple services, and you can have services that belong to multiple programs that are the same type of service can be delivered in multiple programs or organizations. All of them receive supplies. Supplies is a type of a resource, right? That's another concept, and it should be in your data model, right? And then 5 people are asking for testing, and 1 person returns to get their test results. So the people asking for testing, I'm guessing that they receive testing. So, okay, so now we know that they're not just doing harm reduction supplies, they're also doing harm testing. So you've got 2 services right there. So right off the top, I now know that your program does testing and supplies, right? And then you're saying only 1 person comes back to get their test results. Okay, but you said it's a drop-in, and drop-in centers probably have return customers beyond that too. So the way that this works is that you can now answer those questions around what is the return pattern of clients, so that we're not needing to do this over and over again, or we can deliver the results to them when they show up next, or we might be able to get their contact information elsewhere as well. Multiple data sources, ETO, demographics, Excel. I'll stay on you guys and keep answering these questions, just to make sure you guys got what you need. So ETO, it's interesting. The data model is interesting. Take a look at the data models on these things. You'll see that they mix things together all the time. But let's say ETO, let's say it's a clean data set. You've got demographics, you got Excel, rent roll for housing, and another tool for health info. Can a model be used using multiple tools? Yeah, the tools don't matter. You need a data model that aligns those data sets. However, if the data sets are not lined up to your data framework, it's kind of like patching up something fundamentally broken, because the data is still existing in a crappy way that doesn't make sense. So you're constantly, we had to do this with, again, I mentioned Homeward Trust, but they had this situation where we had to merge things and make business logic sense out of it to say anything. But it's like very, very resource intensive. We probably spend more time and money trying to retrofit a broken thing than just, I would say, starting over again. So you got to also like do your cost benefit. So absolutely, you need a data model to make sense of it. That's a given. I would just say, as you do that, consider upgrading your infrastructure if you're using some of these legacy tools. The legacy tools just weren't built the way things are now, and they usually kind of cut and paste data model. They keep adding, and then they cut and paste, and so you're inheriting other people's software in that way. So when you get your data out, it's interesting. That's the context where you can see the data that's actually been collected in improper ways, and you end up with like 70% more clients than you actually have. It's usually because of these legacy systems that haven't been cleaned out. So if you're taking this on, consider that too. And Srinath, cool. Yes, one of the many programs. STI testing, treatment, and care. Harm reduction is seen as an entry point to the larger prevention and care. Yeah. So Srinath, what you want to do is distinguish programs from services, from interactions or cases, encounters, whatever you guys end up landing on, and then collect outcomes at those interactions, interaction outcome versus case outcome. Those are distinct. And then figure out your case life cycle as well. So is this a one and done, or is this a longer term case that has to have a bunch of entry touch points to be able to deliver on its organizational level outcome? So outcomes you need to distinguish, is this an event outcome? Is this an interaction outcome? Is this a case outcome? Is this a program outcome, which is different than an organizational outcome? So outcome as well is a distinct concept in your data model. All right, Leah's asking, in your experience working with data models, what makes a framework flexible enough to be adapted by communities with different cultural and contextual needs? Great. Wow, interestingly, linguistic analysis is really cool for that. So the reason I say that is because there's a bit of a universal grammar to cross-culturally, and this is where my anthropology comes in, because most languages, i.e. cultural worldviews, have a way of talking about the data frameworks like actually make sense cross-culturally as well. They're universal truths, if you might. So a people is a person, right? Whether you're talking in Swahili, or you're talking about Romanian, which is my language, whether you're talking about in English, in a First Nations language, like everyone has a name for people. So like number one thing to get damn right is people, right? And so how do you keep that culturally appropriate? Do I really, really want to argue with a First Nations community that an elder is a distinct category from somebody that's 65? Heck no. No, it's a completely different cultural like construct. An elder is a type of characteristic of a person. But we can all agree that it's a person. The elder is a person. They might be 65 years old. That's a different characteristic. That's a demographic thing. But they're considered an elder in their culture. So it is absolutely not your business to define uh, the taxonomy, the lexicon of that culture. Taxonomy, ontology, your data framework is your ontology, is your universal grammar, and your taxonomy allows you to have that cultural flexibility and nimbleness to translate the data fields in terminology that makes sense. And then the ontology allows you to translate the lexicon of one cultural concept into the lexicon of a separate cultural concept, i.e. mainstream Western funder reporting outcome mentality, right? So that data model allows for you to do that exchange, that translation. It's your kind of part of your Rosetta Stone toolkit to do that. So hopefully that works. Hopefully that answers that. And yeah, the way you do that is you conceptualize your taxonomy really clearly, and you map your taxonomy. Just so everybody knows, is like your terminology. Like gender is female, male, other, but in other contexts, it might be. I'm like gonna mess up my like the two-spirit terminology, right? And you might want to use two-spirit like First Nations words as well. Doesn't matter, right? You can still translate that into gender, female, male, uh, non-binary to your funders because it's a person, and it's the same person has these two concepts entwined. All right. So with that being said, I'm over time and I got to let y'all go, but hopefully that was useful. Maybe too technical, not technical enough. Don't know. I do care. So let me know. And hopefully you got some practical things to take away in your data journeys and your organizations. And of course, we'll see you guys in September. During the summer, we're going to pilot some podcasts because I'm taking some time off and my team's taking some time off. But yeah, some podcasts, it'll be fun. They will be AI assisted podcasts because my speaking voice is terrible. But yeah, we'll see how you guys like those, and we'll see you in September again for our next one, which I don't know what it's going to be on, but lots of time between now and then. Have a wonderful summer, everybody, and thank you so much. Bye.